everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Switch gears, and let me say this, is that with the season, this is a fun time of year to do a show like this, because with the season now over, we can dive into some stuff that we wouldn't normally talk about, frankly, during the season, right? The season is really fun, but obviously we know what the kind of the what's the right word I'm looking for here? The arc of a week goes during the season. Monday, we're recapping games. Midweek, we start to look ahead. Friday, it is full-blown preview. So there's a lot of just interesting things that slip through the cracks that we don't get to talk about. As I say all the time, the best part about college football, it's all the gossip and rumor and innuendo and chisme. In Spanish, we call it chisme, the gossip of college football. And so there's certainly a topic that I want to get into right now, and that certainly fits under this category that we probably wouldn't have talked about if it happened during the season, but it happened now, and boy, oh boy, oh boy, do we have to dive in. Did you see what Evan Stewart, star wide receiver at Texas A&M, had to say about the whole setup there with NIL? And he kind of called into some questions, and some stuff happened, and what's the truth, what's fiction? It all centers around that 2022 historically great recruiting class. Woo! Did he drop a nugget that is absolutely worth discussing? Now, before we get into what Evan Stewart said, I think it's at least worth it. I know so much stuff happens in everyday life. You don't remember all the details. So let me refresh kind of your memories to set up what happened this week, and then we'll discuss that. But obviously, look, with Texas A&M, the story around that program for the better part of really about 2 years, dating back to December of 2021, is the historically great 2022 recruiting class, most of which signed in December of 2021. If you remember, at the time, it was literally the greatest recruiting class in the history of recruiting rankings. And at the time, the innuendo was, well, there was no way that Texas A&M, of all schools, could legitimately sign the #1 recruiting class in the history of college football if they weren't cheating their butts off and paying out their behinds in NIL. And so that was kind of a conversation. Lane Kiffin had a press conference where he basically talked about Texas A&M's salary cap. This was before the Nick Saban stuff, but it was kind of just a thing that was kind of loosely thought. And then it became kind of public common knowledge when someone named Sliced Bread, this is all true, you can look it up, Google it, Sliced Bread, went on an Oklahoma message board and said, well, you know, I hear from people that I know, because everybody on a message board knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who knows the mail guy at this place or whatever, the mailman delivered this. The point I'm trying to make, someone named Sliced Bread went on an Oklahoma message board and said the only reason Texas A&M signed their #1 class was because they had a slush fund, essentially, that paid every Texas A&M player in that recruiting class $1 million a piece. And that was how Texas A&M signed that class. That was the only way. That was according to Sliced Bread. Now, for some reason that I'm still not aware of, that report kind of got circulated in such a way that it became like fact. And I think this is the scary part of the world that we live in, to be honest, is that people just see stuff on the internet and it just somehow becomes common fact. Like, I remember credible news outlets, credible people just talking about it in the open, like, oh yeah, well, you know, I mean, Texas A&M, they paid the #1 recruiting class. Everybody got $1 million. And at the time, I think I was the only one. I was like, are we sure that that's really what happened? Can we get somebody a little more credible than a dude or chick, I guess, named Sliced Bread on a message board? Can we get something credible? So I bring it up. You're probably sitting here saying, why are we talking about Sliced Bread today, 2 years after the fact? Well, let's go back full circle to what Evan Stewart said earlier this week as it pertained to NIL and Sliced Bread. So the portal opens on Monday. There's rumors about A&M guys going in. Walter Nolan, I'm still not officially sure if he's actually in, but Hayes Fawcett puts out a report that he plans to enter the transfer portal. And I bring it up because a player on Texas A&M's roster named Bobby Taylor, who was part of that 2022 recruiting class, puts out a post on Instagram that says this. He said, No way 2 years ago you could have told me Jimbo would be fired, coaches leave, and half the class dips. How that happened? Evan Stewart then, and this is where it gets juicy, under the comments section, basically says that this is exactly what he says. He comments on an Instagram post. So we're talking about comments on an Instagram post here on a Wednesday Aaron Torres pod. That's how we roll, baby. But Evan Stewart says, I saw it coming freshman year when I didn't get paid $1 from A&M, but sliced bread had y'all thinking we was millionaires. And so Evan Stewart becomes a national headline because he commented on Bobby Taylor's Instagram post, and this story went viral. And I got a lot of thoughts, but I actually see it differently than most. I think most people see it as a shot at Texas A&M, a shot at NIL. Oh my goodness, all those kids went and none of them got paid. Well, here's my question. If all of them went and none of them got paid, then why are they all still there? Most of the players in that class are still there. Now, we'll see what happens with this portal, cycle over these next few weeks. But Evan Stewart's still there. Most of the best players are still there. And so what I saw is what I talked about at the time. I said, do I think that NIL played no role in the 2022 recruiting class working the way that it did? No, I don't think NIL. I think NIL plays some role in every recruitment everywhere in America, football, basketball, maybe even in sometimes a sport like baseball or whatever. But do I think, this is what I said at the time, and I still believe it now, do I think that NIL was the only reason? Do I think there was a magic slush fund with $1 million per player, according to Sliced Bread? I thought it was ridiculous then, and what Evan Stewart said confirmed it. I believe that most of that class went to Texas A&M because they actually wanted to be at Texas A&M. I know it sounds crazy, but I remember talking about this at the time. Did a big segment, went crazy viral. There were a lot of legitimate reasons outside of NIL why Texas A&M put together that recruiting class that nobody wanted to talk about. Everybody wanted to talk about sliced bread. No. There were legitimate reasons that class came together. First off, let's get into why that class came together, because it certainly wasn't NIL, and why the class is staying together, at least so far. It's because they like A&M. And there are a lot of different reasons why. One, why did the class come together? First of all, you can criticize Jimbo Fisher for a lot. Wasn't a good game day coach, overpaid, stole money from the school, left Florida State high and dry and in a terrible position that Mike Norvell is just now starting to clean up, okay? But the one thing you can never say, Jimbo Fisher always could recruit, man. He could always recruit in the pre-NIL era and in the post-NIL era. Go back and look at the recruiting classes before 2022, okay? In the pre-2022 recruiting class, 2021, he signed the number 8 recruiting class in the country. 2020, he signed the number 6 recruiting class in the country. And in 2019, he signed the number 4 recruiting class in the country. So the 3 years before the historic 2022 class, he had top 10 classes, including one top 5 class at Texas A&M. So he could always recruit pre-NIL. And then 2022, well, you can't go from 6-1 or 4-1 or 8-1. Yeah, you can. Because as I said at the time, there was a wild confluence of events that led to that A&M class coming together that wasn't just NIL. First of all, remember, Texas A&M, where is it located on a map? You don't need to be a geography expert to know. There is a major city that is a major high school football hotbed, about an hour from College Station, Houston, Texas. I've been there many times. I was there for the Final Four. You can get in a car, drive, and in about an hour, you can be in College Station. And Houston has always been Texas A&M's recruiting home base. That year was a historically great class in Houston. I forget all the details. I'm not going to go through all the players. But the bottom line is, you go back to that season, Houston had a historic recruiting year, okay, as far as talent that it produced. I remember there being a stat where it was like, if Texas A&M only signed the kids out of Houston that they signed, or the Houston area, they would have still ended up with the number 12 class overall. So just the Houston kids, number 12 class, including Connor Wigman, who is going to be the starting quarterback next year. So that's one. 2, and I think this is important. Remember when most of those kids committed to Texas A&M. Remember, when a kid commits, for the most part, most kids commit the summer after their junior years. Summer after their junior years, they take all the campus visits, they get offers, they sit down with the coach in the office, they kiss babies and shake hands. Coach says, we want you. Kid says, I'm coming. Most kids commit in the summer of their junior year. Well, what was the summer of all those players' junior years? Let's do some math, okay? So they graduate high school in the spring of 2022, which means they started their senior years in the fall of 2021, which means most committed in the summer of 2021. Why is that important? Oh, I don't know. It was because Texas A&M was coming off the best season of the Jimbo Fisher era. They went 9-1 in the COVID year. Now, we can look back and say it was a mirage, an aberration. But at the time, Texas A&M finished 5th in the college football playoff rankings, nearly made the college football playoff. And so I bring it up because at the time, like there was a thought like Texas A&M really is on the rise. They just finished 9-1. They just finished 5th in the college football playoff rankings. And you don't think Jimbo Fisher sold that to those kids? Hey, we're really close. We're at number 5. You all come here. Guess what? We're going to be number 1 by the time you leave here. And they still might be. Maybe Mike Elko will get them there. Jimbo won't get them there, but they still might be if that group largely sticks together. Keep in mind also, a lot of those kids visited in the fall of 2021. What happened in the fall of 2021? Oh, Texas A&M beat Alabama. So even though it wasn't an incredible season on the field, most kids committed, then they're all visiting when Texas A&M beats Alabama. It all makes sense. Finally, and I think this is a really important part that nobody talks about. You know what else worked in Texas A&M's favor? A few things with the coaching carousel. One, Steve Sarkisian had just finished a bad first year at Texas A&M, 5-7 overall, okay? Not here to pick on Steve Sarkisian. He's done an amazing job, has Texas in the playoff. He's the man. Can't knock him. I was critical of him in the preseason. He has that Texas program rolling right now. But he was coming off a 5-7 year. Texas was not a hot brand in college football at that time. But beyond that, that was a wildly volatile coaching carousel that led to a lot of Texas A&M success. Remember, that was the year. USC fires Clay Helton in September. LSU fires Coach O in October. That leads to Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma, Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame. And then, oh, by the way, Florida fires Dan Mullen, Miami fires Manny Diaz, all in the same year. So think about that. Coaching changes at LSU, USC, Miami, Florida, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma. Why does that matter? There was a lot of kids that were committed other places that switched their commitments when the coach that was recruiting them left. We talked about this at the time. There was a 5-star, Gabriel Brownlow Dindy, top 10 player in America, was down to Oklahoma and Texas A&M, commits to Oklahoma, ready to go to Oklahoma. Then Lincoln Riley leaves, says, I'm not going to USC. I'm going to go to Texas A&M. Still at A&M, by the way, at least as I know, unfortunately has dealt with a lot of injuries. Bring it up. Jacoby Matthews, 4-star safety from Louisiana. Forget if he was ever technically committed to LSU, but LSU was the favorite. Then Coach O gets fired. Ends up at A&M. Shamar Stewart, 5-star defensive lineman from Miami, was down to Miami, Florida, and Texas A&M. Miami fires its coach. Florida fires its coach. Shamar Stewart says, well, I'm not going to go play for Billy Napier. I don't know Billy Napier. I'm not going to play for Mario Cristobal. I don't know Mario Cristobal. Where does he end up? Texas A&M. So listen, goes back to what I feel like you ever see, if you haven't watched the show, you've certainly seen the GIF, the Johnny Drama victory GIF from Entourage. That's how I feel here, because to me, this vindicates what I said. I never believed that Texas A&M could not put together a recruiting class without egregiously overpaying for players. And by the way, I'll go back to what I said a minute ago. People want to say, oh, Evan Stewart was taking a shot at NIL. I don't think he was taking a shot at NIL. I think what he was saying was, if you thought that we were millionaires by coming to A&M, you're an idiot. And again, it goes back to what I said a minute ago. If it was only about NIL and they didn't get paid and that's all it was about, then why haven't all of them bounced? The only ones that have really bounced are the ones that were in trouble. Walter Nolan this week said he would go in the portal, but everybody else is still there. Now, it may change. I don't know. I'm just bringing it up to say This feels like victory for Torres because I never bought that dumb narrative, and neither should you. And by the way, 2 quick closing thoughts because I want to get to some other stuff. But I bring it up for 2 reasons. 1, be careful the media you consume. Even good media members ran with that. Oh, I mean, everyone knows A&M's paying $1 million a year. Yeah, they're paying $1 million a year to 30 kids. There's a $30 million slush fund just lying around. The 3-star punter got $1 million coming to A&M. Really, that's what we're doing? So be careful. And then 2, lastly, I'll say this. I do think this is the lasting legacy of Jimbo Fisher. Wasn't good enough on the field. Didn't win enough games. Lost too many games that he shouldn't lose. We've been over that time and time again. But he proved you can recruit at an elite level at A&M. There are enough good players to go around. The resources are there. The facilities are there. The stadium, the game day experience is incredible. Now we'll see if Mike Elko, what he can do with the leftovers from that 2022 class. By the way, we'll see how much of that 2022 class ends up staying and finishing this thing out. But I never believed that story. Evan Stewart confirmed it.